Because this audience, by definition, is not only tech savvy, but focused on innovation and really cool things. I am Gary Shapiro, President and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association, and with me is the founder and CEO of Aereo, Chet Kanojia.
That's right.
There you go. Welcome, everyone here. So the Consumer Electronics Association, for those of you that don't know, not only owns and produces the International CES and is a partner in this great event at CE Week, but is also the association representing some 2,000 technology companies. And it has some very fundamental, basic principles under which it operates. One principle being that innovation is really good and the government should not mess it up. And that kind of defines our efforts over the last at least 30 years since I personally was involved in making sure that the Sony Betamax became a legal product, which for the youngsters in the audience, there's this thing that actually recorded technology on tape. Tape is like Scotch tape, and it used magnetic, anyway, it's all technology. But it did allow the principle of, create the very important Supreme Court principle in 1985 that a product is legal if it has significant legal uses, and a legal use is recording of over-the-air broadcast. And that's the Sony Betamax principle, and that allowed a whole range of technology to come in, and the Supreme Court spoke very loudly on that point, and it really defined this industry for the next 30 years. Since then, we've been engaged in a whole bunch of issues where innovation has been threatened. And if you think about what it is and what we do as an industry, we're always doing something different. We're innovating. And when you do something different, you're affecting someone else's status quo. And the status quo are existing industries. You know, the motion picture industry, they only used to show things in theaters, and they freaked out when people could record television because they controlled on television when and where you would watch something. And the VCR all of a sudden liberated people. We changed things when the MP3 came along, and the music industry was trying to put special taxes on devices and ban recording and do all these different things, and we fought for that. And along the way, we seem to fight for every new, even the internet itself. I remember testifying in Congress saying that it is not a copyright violation to forward someone's email, because the content community defined the internet as a massive piracy device. So keep in mind that anytime we do something new, it is threatening someone that's old. And just as broadcasters, the three broadcasters had a monopoly in the 1960s, and along came cable and threatened the broadcast monopoly, and then along came satellite, along came the internet, along came pre-recorded. Every one of those new technologies took market share away from someone with an old business model. And sadly, what happens is those people with business models run to Congress, they run to the courts, they do everything as powerful institutions can do to block the new innovator. And it's just not in consumer electronics. We're seeing it with Uber, which is a car service that threatens taxi cabs, but it uses up, in a very green way, limo drivers who are sitting around doing nothing and lets them make some extra money by picking up people who would like the convenience and comfort of a limo service. And in some cities, like sadly Washington, D.C. and New York City, are blocking it. And others, like some West Coast cities and others, are encouraging it. And you see how cities respond differently. And it defines, in a sense, whether a city or a government or a country even is welcoming of innovation or not. Now, we've benefited as a nation because our nation has been among the most welcoming of innovation. In part because we are an innovative culture. That's who we are. We come from immigrants who try to do things better, in part because of our nation of laws, in part because of our First Amendment, which allows us to say and speak and try new things. And I identified Michael Petrick in our audience before, but he's been with us for over 20 years, heading up our policy efforts, and he is known in the Washington, D.C. area as always fighting for the little guy, always fighting for innovation. So one of our newest members is up here on stage, Chet from Aereo, and we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about your company and how you fit in as a disruptor and how that's affecting you. But before we get there, could you just tell us, before Aereo, give us 1 or 2 minutes on how you got there with your life and moved up? I mean, your brief bio.
Sure, yeah. So I fit a bunch of your buckets. I'm an immigrant. I was born in India and came here for grad school. And in late 99, early 2000, I started my first real company. Before that, I started a small one. We made a bunch of money with my roommate. And it was in the cable TV technology space, and we had pioneered how to collect viewership data from cable boxes. And it wasn't really used for advertising initially. It was more used for spectrum planning, how do you split nodes, where do you put hubs, all those things, since the cable guys were spending billions of dollars building networks. And got really educated about the industry. I've had a fascination for this industry for a very long time. In fact, the VCR, growing up in India, and television came to my hometown in 1982, black and white. And soon thereafter, I think 86 or so, there was the first VCR. They were incredibly expensive. So of course, I wanted to start a business, going to apartment buildings and wiring them and putting a VCR in the basement and running people movies. Thank God I didn't do that. Would have gone well. VCRs became cheap, and that's sort of the interesting point of this, is technology just becomes cheaper and cheaper. So I was looking at all this viewership information in my last company, and I decided that there was a gross imbalance because of the monopolistic structure of this industry between what people watched and what they paid for. People watch 7 or 8 channels, they pay for 500. They don't have a choice. Even if there's a second provider in the market, it's essentially the same deal. And there's layers and layers of sort of, anti-competitive behavior built in. And when it started, it was a good deal. But as the internet's happened, my core belief was IP, Internet Protocol, basically dismantles artificial bundles. It doesn't matter, because they're analog business models, whether it was a disc or a record or whatever, because consumers want what they want. And the internet has that ability to allow people to get that. And so when I sold my last company, I was sort of sitting around trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and decided that it was time to create a company that was going to provide an alternative to how people access TV. And it was going to be along the internet ethos of choice, flexibility, rational pricing, a relationship between price and value, all those components that don't exist in the marketplace today. So that was the story.
So, I'm sorry, but you had a company before Aereo.
Yes.
And tell us about that.
So that was a company that became part of Microsoft in 2008, and it was a supplier to the cable industry. And we had pioneered this software protocol for measuring viewership data and advertising that sort of goes with that. And it was really a fantastic learning experience, because I learned sort of firsthand how difficult it is to innovate on the television. If you had a new user interface, you couldn't get in front of the consumer. If you had a new piece of content, you couldn't get in front of the consumer, because all these companies were so highly vertically integrated that there was gatekeepers upon gatekeepers upon gatekeepers. So if you wanted to innovate in television, the only conclusion I reached was start your own new thing and attract consumers to come there, and then you can create value.
And so you sold the company.
Yes.
And you could have retired?
I could have, yes. Although I was 38, so it was going to be hard to retire. I'm married, so it was...
So what was the inspiration for Aereo?
A series of convictions, I guess. One, that television had to migrate to the internet. Second, no matter who you were, you did not like your incumbent cable provider. It was just, I'd never met anybody who said, except for people who worked for cable companies, who said, we love our cable company. In fact, it was funny, a friend of mine who gets a highly subsidized bill from one of the large cable companies said, God, if I didn't have the subsidy, there's no way on earth I'd pay for this, because there's no value in it for me. So that was the second. There was a rich market, there was a rich segment. Third, bandwidth was everywhere, and it was increasing. And when you start putting all these things together and you say, there is an opportunity to create a completely new way which content is going to get in front of consumers. And it's going to be a different set of layers. Right now, the name of the game is you control distribution, you buy wholesale programming, and you retail it out to consumers, and you control the package, and maybe you don't control the package anymore, the programmers do. But I think the future, as I saw it, was there was going to be a destination where people were going to come and sell content to people who wanted to buy content. And it wasn't going to be an artificial system. And cost of content production, creativity, everything is changing all around in this industry. So what was missing to me was a destination, an internet-based site where all the technological elements were taken care of: bandwidth, power, user interfaces, consumer experience, customer care, billing, so that creators could come in and sell content directly to consumers. And right now there's 3 layers of middlemen in between this whole thing. And my fundamental belief is that that system, that artificial packaging, has to go away. And whether me or somebody else, it's gonna happen. And the reason is because the way the industry is structured, it is ever increasing focused on profits, not customers. And as soon as you have that dynamic, a lot of people start leaving the ecosystem, and once a lot of people leave the ecosystem, new things happen.
So what you're saying is actually, in a sense, bigger than Aereo, because you're saying that the cable industry is going to stop bundling.
It has to. Ultimately, the way the costs are rising, and I think the McCain bill was an interesting observation. And I mean, I had never put numbers to it.
Explain to everyone what the McCain bill is.
So I don't have a full in-depth understanding of the bill, but my understanding is, well, number one, the data that was offered in that, there was 7%, 8% compounded annual growth in the bill, right? So you're now looking at average bills, even you take internet aside, of 120, 150 bucks a month. So now you combine that with the fact that if you just wanted today broadcast television, and you said, I want it in high def, and I want the ability to record it, which are, by the way, simple consumer features that have been with us since time immemorial. You cannot do that for less than $80 to $100 a month, right? So this artificial system. So I think the McCain bill is about saying, look, you can package, do whatever you want, as long as the consumer has the ability to pick. They may pay more, but allow people to make that choice.
Well, the cable industry would argue that if they stopped bundling, first of all, the higher prices have gone because they're paying copyright owners. They really don't have a choice. And second, if you take away bundling, they will not be able to offer many of the minority programming, some of the sports programming, that it will not be sustained. How do you respond to that?
So I think that was a rational argument in the beginning, where you could offer a differentiated, distinct product. I mean, I don't think BET would have gotten in front of consumers if there wasn't cable. The problem is now with all the media consolidation over the last 15 years, that doesn't hold true anymore. I mean, if you're a new programmer and you want to launch a new channel, you cannot get on the dial. It just doesn't work that way. You have to be part of this closed system. So I think that argument doesn't make any sense. And evidence of that is every new content developer producer is on YouTube. They're not on cable, they're on YouTube. Reason? It's free distribution. It's distribution that is in front of the masses.
All right, well, let's go to Aereo. Let's not assume that everyone here understands it. Can you just explain it in simple terms?
Sure. So the idea, all of this distilled down to, I said, well, half the viewership at any given time is on broadcast TV, all the major networks, and which, by the way, happens to be free to air. It's freely available to you. All you need is a good antenna. Most people don't want to do it. The weather, the buildings, the this, the that, everything sort of gets in the way. So we miniaturized TV antennas to about this size. And the innovation, and the reason we did that was so we can put millions of these things in a small room and then lease consumers those antennas remotely. So the point was we can make in front of the consumer that 50% of the value proposition that is part of the bundle is now available to you at 10% or less of the price. And if you can do that, the belief, and rightly so, was change will start happening. That'll be a wedge for people to say, okay, I've got, that's probably the broadcasters throwing tables.
I think CBS owns this facility.
And the premise, very simply, is that you take Aereo, which gives you great quality, DVR included, access to broadcast TV on any device, $8 a month. People consume content online, Netflix, Hulu, other things like that, another $8 a month. For 15, 16 bucks a month, you have a fantastic, unless you're a die-hard ESPN customer, your answer is there, right? And so that's the pitch of Aereo, is the simplest way to get live TV on any device at a very rational price.
So you're explaining more technically, but from a consumer perspective, the benefit they get is if you're living in New York City and you cannot get a free over-the-air service because an apartment building is blocking you, what choices do they have without Aereo? And what choice do they have with Aereo?
Today, if you live in a building, whether it's New York City or you live in a valley in Los Angeles or you live in, in a suburb of Boston or whatever, if you cannot get free-to-air signal because you can't get on the roof or there's restrictions or whatever that happens to be, your only choice is call either a satellite provider or a cable company. And the way they package it is you can't get most of what you want and pay for it. You get everything else along with that, and that cost, the number starts at $120, $150.
So over $100 a month or no service at all.
At all.
And so you've come into New York City, and what can a New York consumer do?
They can just go to Aereo.com, sign up, and instantaneously have access to 30 plus channels in New York City, along with a DVR that they can watch on iPads, iPhones, connected TVs, through a Roku box, and we'll keep increasing the number of devices.
But they must have an internet-connected device.
They should have.
Wireless or
wireless.
Either one. So everyone got that? That's the basic Aereo model. You can have access to the local network channels, other offerings. I was at Bloomberg today, and they're talking about Aereo, actually, and they were saying, we are part of Aereo, we love it. And we think it's great. So you can get access to these channels for just a few bucks a month.
$8 a month, yeah.
And are you in any other markets in New York?
Yeah, so we launched in Boston a couple weeks ago. We just started Atlanta last week, and we committed to build out 22 cities this year. My guess is we're probably going to get 18 or 19 done by August, and we'll launch.
So you'll have 19 cities by August?
Yeah.
And what's the next city?
There's a whole batch of them coming. Can't announce.
You can't announce?
No.
Are you publicly traded?
We're not.
Then you can announce. Just don't want to. Okay, so, and how many people have signed up in New York City?
We have not publicized.
Is it more than 100?
Yes.
Is it less than 10,000?
No.
So it's more than
I
10,000?
can't go beyond that.
Is it bigger than a bread basket? Okay. My 20 questions are up. Now, but yet, so you introduced a service, and it was about, when did you introduce it?
So we commercially opened up in August, September of last year in New York, but we really started, we simplified our pricing and kind of opened things up in a more proper way. There used to be a velvet rope you had to apply, and if we liked you, we'd call you, kind of stuff. All these things that startups do to appear clever and smart, but the reality is we were just not prepared to support a large number of customers.
So it's less than a year.
Bottom line.
And what happened then? What did the broadcasters do?
So the company was sued by about 17 or 18, I forget what the exact count, but it was somewhere in that range, broadcasters. The allegation was, much like it always is, copyright infringement. And we were fortunate that, so the company's a technology company, and we were convinced that if we got a fair shake on the technology, we would win. And we were fortunate that the court basically took a very in-depth view of the technology. There was there was testimony and experts and this and that, the whole bit. And shock, we won, which was...
this was a federal court?
Federal court in New York.
And was it a court of appeals?
Well, first it was a trial court.
But the Court of Appeals said...
And reaffirmed that, and they very much said that the technology is well within precedent. Consumers have a right to have an antenna. Consumers have a right to make personal recordings going back to your Betamax days. And where that antenna is located or where the DVR is located isn't material. What's material is, does an individual have their own recording? Does the individual have their own antenna? So if it's a one-to-one relationship, it is what's known as a private performance, meaning a consumer is controlling their own media.
And it was a 2-to-1 decision, if I recall?
2-to-1 decision.
And is there an appeal to the United States Supreme Court, or is that time elapsed?
My understanding is there is an appeal for an en banc review, which is to have the entire Second Circuit panel review.
So there is an appeal for all the federal court judges in the Second Circuit to hear it?
Correct.
And we're waiting to see whether they'll take it.
Whether they'll take it.
And then it can go to the Supreme Court and see if they take
Perhaps, maybe
it.
not.
So the bottom line of it is, there is a favorable decision which has freaked out the networks, right? But there's another case on the West Coast which has gone the other way.
You know, we don't know what the technology is. There's no record of what the technology is. And I think the more important thing to people to pay attention to is the Hopper case as well, which is, so just to educate people a little bit about this, right? What's at stake here, what really is at stake, and this is very fundamentally important, is your ability to control your own media, right? So if there is no notion of a private performance, meaning I have a song, whether I store it in my house or in an internet locker, should be relevant. I mean, in Aereo's case, it's free-to-air broadcast television. Obviously, a consumer has a right to that using an antenna. But where I store it, it doesn't matter, right? And if you don't honor that principle, you're opening such a massive Pandora's box, literally speaking. Because today, how many of you use Dropbox? Right? Well, think about a world if the world heads towards a point where you have to pay a tax every time you store media away from your house or in a different file locker or whatever. Legitimate, absolutely, you have a license to this content. That's what they're asking for. That's how dramatic, that's how big this issue is, right? Whether it's music, files, pictures, you name it. And that's what's at stake. So I think it's a very foundational, important issue. And I still continue to believe, not still, I mean, given our wins, even more conviction that this is so fundamentally important and so logical, right? I have the right to have an antenna. Now, where I put it, who cares? You know, can I put it in your house, Gary? We're private enterprise, right? Can I put it on your neighbor's house? Sure.
So how does it feel? You're a little guy, immigrant from India, you're living the American dream, and all of a sudden every major network hates you and is, not only have they sued you now, but there's been two other responses. One response we heard at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, the head of at least 3 networks, I think, said, if your product stays legal, they will consider going to a subscription-only service for the free over-the-air broadcast. Now, for my entire career, all I've heard from broadcasters is that free over-the-air broadcast is sacred. It's important. It's incredibly valuable to the American public, and that's why they're sitting on this free spectrum they have, which is a huge swath of spectrum. Now they're saying the spectrum really isn't that important. If a scary guy sitting next to me could defeat David, could take on these Goliaths and win. How does that feel?
The logic, right? I maybe a sort of an immigrant's naivete, but I fundamentally believe that I think the right will prevail. And I understand that people have lots of lobbyists and all of this and that. But at the end of the day, I think the basic logic by which the spectrum was granted, the idea that free-to-air broadcasting, Congress wants to preserve this, should want to preserve this, people have a right to this. These entire businesses were built on the back of this free spectrum grant, right? And I think business logic aside, I'm going to abandon 100+ million homes worth of distribution and become yet another channel on the dial where I got to, 10 times more, spend 10 times more money in marketing myself. That logic doesn't make any sense. I think the reality is this agenda of becoming pay channels has been there for day one, and I think we all recall when the digital transition happened, this was another issue that was
right. I'm sitting here thinking,
picking on Aereo.
The Obama administration pushed through Congress as the first decision President Obama made when he was not even in office. It was after he was elected. Before he was in, he said, oh my God, the digital transition is coming. Some people might not get their free over-the-air broadcast service. Congress, please rush through another $1 billion in spending on top of $1 billion. $2 billion were wasted to ensure that a few Americans might not lose TV service for 10 minutes. And here the major network CEOs are saying, free over-the-air broadcast really isn't that
talking
important.
both sides of the mouth, right? Because on one hand, the NAB is saying 54 million Americans today use an antenna in some way, shape, or form, right? So that's not a few. right? That's how many people we got, 320 million, 330 million?
Well, there's two numbers. One number is how many Americans rely exclusively on free over-the-air broadcasts. And CEA numbers, most other numbers say that's well under 10% of Americans. And sometimes thrown in that by mistake is people who don't even rely on free over-the-air broadcasts. They just don't get television. They use internet, or they increasingly kids are using, just their wireless devices.
So median age for MVP.
And the other number is the large number that you just threw out. So anybody who during the course of a year might turn on another TV in their house and get over-the-air television.
Second set, third
right.
set, right? And the current model is if you have a second or a third set, you got to pay another 10 or 15 bucks to the cable guy to put a converter there, right? So it's sort of all which way. So I find that posturing. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think there's any ounce of credibility in that whole thing.
So you're saying that they're just posturing. Well, the third reaction, the lawsuit was one. Second is, well, we'll forget free over-the-air broadcast and charge subscription ourselves. And then I think it was Glenn Britt of Time Warner Cable, am I correct, said, hey, as a cable company, we'll start doing the same thing as Aereo. Doesn't that, how do you feel about that?
So I think I've said this a number of times. I have no interest in helping get in between other people's disputes. If Aereo's net result is consumers have more choices, look, we're building this company not so that you can, the cable guy can make yet more money, right? We're building this company because consumers can reduce their bills and have a different choice, an alternative. So I look at this and say, if a cable guy does this and still wants to charge, let's not forget who these people are. At the end of the day, they're driven by profits, not consumer satisfaction, right? I have the luxury of saying I have no profits, I don't sort of give a shit. So all I care about is consumer satisfaction.
Does Barry Diller know you don't care about profits? Barry Diller is one of the major investors in Aereo.
I think,
come on,
we're in the...
You care about profits too.
I think we care more about customer satisfaction, way more than...
You can't care that much if you're losing money every year.
I think you can for a long period of time. I think the internet...
How many years?
I don't know.
Before you stop caring and start caring about profits.
I think if you build a good product that people care and use, and you obsess about the product and people, profits come. You can't optimize for profits. You can only, to me, a good business is
this is what Twitter and Facebook and others. But the headline,
I'm not suggesting that I don't care about making.
So you're saying, so this headline says Time Warner weighs Aereo model, Washington Post.
Okay.
And that was a month or two ago, May 3rd. You say welcome to my world of competition, or?
I think it's great. I think the people who offer the best product at the lowest price, great customer care, will have a place, and there'll be a nice competitive system.
So the argument that, that's great for you to care about customer service, but you're stealing our content, so you're like a pirate that comes in and you're taking things that belong to us, and you're giving it away for free, saying because you only care about customer service. So you're uncharitably a pirate, charitably Robin Hood. How do you respond to that?
So first and foremost, the requirement is to program in public interest and inconvenience, right? This is free-to-air broadcast. We're not doing this on ESPN or any other licensed channel, right?
So you're not taking ESPN?
We're not touching any, those are part of the...
Just free over-the-air broadcast, which should be free and
which a consumer has a license for, right? So it's very narrow, and people conflate this whole thing. Second, there's absolutely no debate that a consumer has a right to pick this up using their antenna. Now, so let's draw some, hypotheticals here, right? Does a consumer have a right to buy an antenna? Nobody disputes that. Does a consumer have a right to lease an antenna? Nobody disputes that. You can buy it on a credit card. You're leasing effectively. Radio Shack, Walmart, everybody runs a layaway program. You pick any argument you want to make, right? How you purchase, no debate. Nobody questions that. Where it's located, nobody questions. There's nothing in the rule book that says the cord has to be only 10 feet long. There's nothing in the rule book that says the cord can be 500 feet.
So what you're arguing essentially is the technicalities of the law, right? But you're up against...
the spirit of the law, right? The spirit of the law
is... the spirit of free over-the-air broadcasting is that anyone should have access to it for free if you're in a geographic area.
Right.
But look, let's be honest, the motion picture industry, the broadcasting, they're gearing up and watching this. They are the most powerful lobbyists. I mean, just yesterday it was announced the NPA hired the chief counsel to the House Commerce Committee. They have literally hundreds of lobbyists who used to, I mean, Senator Chris Dodd-Frank, he runs the Motion Picture Association. NAB, Senator Gordon Smith, highly respected, nicest guy in the world. He's going to be out there trying to put you out of business.
We have your support, Gary.
Well, on that happy note, unfortunately, I see our time has elapsed. I hope to go. Who's in charge of this event? Can we just go a couple of minutes further? Yes, all right, thank you. So I want to get some, if there's questions from you, unless someone's going to throw, oh my God, there are questions. Is there a microphone out there for questions?
Let me get one.
Oh, good. I don't know why the shot clock is down to 0, but we will get a microphone. Tara, you're holding a microphone. Will you go to someone with their hand up, please? You're up, sir. Can you identify yourself, please, and say who you're with?
Peter Benjamin with TVOnTheGo.com. First of all, congratulations on the Aereo win. It's big for the major industry, as well as the small producers. Are you guys having any traction with like companies like Netflix, maybe bringing in proprietary content for the future?
We're a technology company, right? And there's a very simple and a very specific reason. It's almost a religious reason for us, which is we think that the future should be tech guys do tech and content guys do content. The problem when you start integrating those into a vertical stack is that's when you forget the purpose of your being, which is to serve, create a real true alternative and a true marketplace. So our focus is going to be just sort of focus on tech and let consumers pick a couple of options that they think make sense. And a lot of consumers are perfectly happy saying, I got a Netflix app, I got an Aereo app, or I got an Amazon Prime app, right? And let them sort of pick and choose along those things. There may be a meta aggregator at the end, which is, who knows what that might or might not look like. So we're going to focus on the tech component, and there's a huge market for us, right? I mean, even if we completely screwed this up and got to 3, 4, 5% penetration, that's a massive number. So my team's focus is purely stick to the knitting and allow your technology to be used by others, as opposed to going and buying content and selling content. The problem in that is that never ends well, right? I mean, the cable guys now are struggling with that, which is cost of content only goes up and retail pricing doesn't move. So why on earth would you want to come into the business and say, I'm going to put $500 million or $1 billion in to buy wholesale and essentially end up with a 10-15% margin business, or start having to go become a Hollywood studio effectively? I think that's not for me. And if I was that clever, I wouldn't be doing this, right? So.
Okay, we'll get more questions in. If the questions are short and the answers are short, so please identify yourself quickly and just an answer, not speech. Questions, not speeches.
Hi, I'm Pamela Grace, and I used to work for Bell Labs, so we help design the communications industry, cable and wireless. It seems to me all you're doing is replacing the cable pipe with a wireless pipe. Is that a correct characterization?
No, the signal gets to the consumer via the internet.
Well, what's the pipe?
The internet.
Which is run on what pipe?
Doesn't matter.
Cable or wireless?
As long as it's IP.
Either one. Any internet, it's like how do you get to a website? You can get there through a cable, you can get there with Wi-Fi, you can get there through your telephone. It's just a pipe.
Besides every question.
No, I'm happy to ask the question.
This is kind of interesting. Wayne.
Please identify yourself.
I'm sorry, James Claudic, TV6 here in New York City. I'm one of your customers.
Oh, thank you.
But I don't get my TV6 off my antenna that I'm leasing from you.
So the way we do things is we select a site.
You can't select. If you're going to act as a common antenna.
We're not a common antenna, that's the point.
Well, I'm leasing an antenna from you, aren't I?
We are an individual antenna. We're not a common antenna in the classic sense.
Okay, I'm leasing a antenna for me as a subscriber.
Correct.
How come I don't get my channel 6?
And all the channels that are available to that antenna at that location,
It's
are available. And those, as long as we can get it quality and guide data consistently, and a lot of times we can't get the quality, all those channels are made available.
My transmitter is 3/4 of a mile away from your antenna, sitting in Long Island City.
And if our data center is not in Long Island City, I think that's sort of the...
Where is the antenna located?
It's in Brooklyn.
Okay, same deal.
If we receive it and we're capable of receiving, the antennas are capable of receiving it, it is made available.
How about channel 3?
Same thing. Everything that we are capable of receiving, we allow on the guide. So if we're not receiving it consistently, that's when it's not available.
Then who in your corporation is taking care of this?
We continue to improve our technology, and when we get to the point...
We have a lot of questions, and you've asked about 12, so we're going to move on.
Hi, my name is Reggie. I want to kind of piggyback on that for a second. Are you only relaying digital over the air? Because there's still low power TV that's analog. I think his operation may actually be analog, since I believe it's low power.
It is digital only, yes.
That's probably why he can't carry it.
Is it? Thank you for answering the question. Next question.
The signal is
Who are you, sir?
Oh, Chuck Azar, Instant Replay.
Oh, you're famous. This is a famous Chuck Azar. Legend in the industry.
The signal is picked up by the individual antenna for each subscriber, and then impressed onto the internet, and the subscriber receives the signal from the internet. Is that correct? The subscriber does not have another antenna at his location.
Correct.
Okay. So, internet is the pipe, if you will. You're just providing an antenna location for that subscriber, and that's how your business plan works. And it makes sense, and that's why so far you've been ruled. All the ruling has gone in your favor. When the question was asked, would you be getting other programming? Would you take a person, let's say HBO, and say, hey, we'd like to piggyback on your system? Would you then allow HBO to come in and charge your subscriber, each individual subscriber who wanted to buy that, and transmit it over your system?
Don't know what the future holds. So we've done a test with Bloomberg TV, for example, which is a licensing arrangement for the purposes of the test, where it is a similar model where Bloomberg is coming in and making it available to the consumers. I think it's a more broader question thematically in the industry is the future individual apps like this? So HBO Go is a great example of that, right? Or is it a single aggregation point? And I think none of us know the answer. We'll have to sort of wait and see how this model evolves at some point. I personally think of the industry in sort of the following way. Skinny live, deep libraries, right? So I think of the dial being a skinny live dial, which is temporal, which has sports news, things that are relevant to you at any given time. And libraries, which have access to a deep experience, but you figure out what you want, whether your friends tell you, social feeds, whatever, and then you go seek it out. HBO clearly is in that category, so I don't know how this model is going to collide at the end of the day. So we'll watch and see how.
Next question. Tara, if you can grab the mics after the question, we can move quickly.
Hi, this is Deborah Yao from SNL Kagan. Chet, I interviewed you last year. Thank you. I just wanted to find out what your response is to ABC coming out with their own, real-time apps. You can actually watch it. So it seems like direct competition to you, and also announcements by TBS and TNT that they will come out with apps that will stream, their shows either VOD or real-time. So it seems that they're copying what you're doing and just doing their own thing. What's your response to that?
So more things like this, good for consumer. I think absolutely every modality of use that a consumer wants to have and has ability to, absolutely, that's great. I think I just want to clarify, for a lot of people it's not obvious, and it may be that there is two things. One is, are you, really the question is, are you authenticated or non-authenticated customer, right? So the question comes down to the bundle. So ABC, TBS, all these things, are they within the bundle? And if they're within the bundle, it's a very different proposition to the consumer, which is continue to pay us $200 a month, and rightfully so, we will provide you more and more features, which is great. And I think for people who don't want to be part of the bundle, I don't think we view these things as competitive in that sense, because it's a very different value proposition in front of the consumer. And I think to answer your question, that's another it's an unknown whether these channels are going to become apps, and the cable pipe is essentially going to get carrying a toll, if you will, or they're going to be actually consolidated channels. And I think there's huge dangers, huge opportunities in this evolution.
So while we're getting ready for the next question, I have a question for the audience. How many of you think that Aereo should be a legal service? L-E-G-A-L. Raise your hands. How many of you think it should be an illegal service? There's one right here. All right, well, this is a friendly crowd.
Thank you.
Gary Reaver. I got it.
Gary Marston,
I'm sorry.
HD Guru.
I apologize, Gary.
I've used your service on a number of devices, iPhone, television. When it's talking heads, the picture's very good, but there appears to be limitations in bandwidth. So when the image fades from black, it gets pixelated, or if there's motion, etc., requiring a higher bandwidth. Are there any plans to increase the bandwidth in the New York area, or is this basically how you're going to?
No, it's an excellent question. So the way the Aereo technology works is each consumer has, and I'll repeat this for a second, antenna, but the whole circuit is unique to you, right? So transcoding is part of that function as well. So one of the ways we've designed it that ultimately, in one of our next releases, is going to be an individual specific bandwidth setting. So right now you see this high, medium, low. The high, medium, low you can toggle, but it is universal in the sense the highest bit rate is 2.75 megabits. I think the median number is 2.5 and peaks out to 3.2. What you can do in the next few, I forget when the next release is, that it'll be your setting. So you will say my high setting is good for 8 megabits a second. Because I have files, whatever I have for high bandwidth connectivity, and in which case, you will see a lot of those high motion artifacts being managed better.
What's the ceiling going to be?
We've run tests up to 11 megabits a second.
And when is this going to happen?
When is this going to happen? All right, Gary, your threshold for questions is over.
Next question.
I can't commit to a date. It's a feature that's been
How about Rebecca Day, right here, has been waiting patiently?
Rebecca Day, CE Daily. Other than expanding into other metropolitan areas, how do you intend to grow the business?
So expanding, number one, the biggest problem I think Aereo still has, and I think a lot of us do, is it's not simple enough. It's simple on an iPad, right? You go click on an icon, cool, this is great. But let's not forget, people still have this expectation of they click a remote thing and it starts and shows up. I think that's going to be an important focus for us on how do we make it simple, how do we make it sociable so that people can talk, share, communicate with each other what the value is that they're getting. One of the biggest interesting things about internet types companies is that you can either fall into the trap of mass marketing, right? Buy billboards, do this, do that, and all this other stuff. Or you can take all that money and invest in the product and let people find their way out and build on it. So the temptation of doing this mass marketing is so great because the rewards are immediate and short-term and quick, but it is a huge discipline that you have to just say, let's just invest in the product. And that's sort of the fork we are at. If I win, hopefully I will since I'm the CEO, we'll continue to just invest in the product and try to make it simple so that it shows up on your TV without having to do, a lot of complicated things.
Okay, next question, Margaret. Are you prepared to be sued in every market you enter?
Well, I think we filed for a declaratory judgment in the Second Circuit, asking the federal court here, since this is the court that's been viewing the case, to declare that their ruling is binding nationwide. So we'll see what the resolution of that happens to be.
You're waiting for a decision from the 3-judge panel, or is this a district court? For the district court, okay.
Yeah, where are you with?
Tara, we have a question right here. All right, this is a gentleman, if I recall, you raised your hand and said you think he should be illegal, right?
Well, in the same way that Napster was made illegal, held by the...
Could you please identify yourself? You didn't publicly and you're asking a question. I hate to put you on the spot, but you are asking a question.
My name is Lincoln Milstein. I'm from Hearst Corporation.
I'm sorry?
I'm from Hearst Corporation.
Oh, from Hearst. Okay, there you go. Broadcast.
But setting aside the issue of legality for a second, because if you win, there's no guarantee that somebody else won't come in and just take you out. To the point that earlier questioner asked, that ABC is going to have its own watch app. I mean, setting aside the issue of legality, if every broadcaster goes out and has his or her own watch app, why would I want to pay you $8 or whatever it is for your service?
And I think I answered the question. I think those are good options for the consumer. I think the key question is, are you part of the bundle or are you not part of the bundle? If they're not part of the bundle, I think that's great. Good choice for the consumer. I think that's fantastic.
But then you're out of business.
Oh, I think that's the least of my problems. But yes, I think that's a great option for the consumer.
Here, we got one over there.
It's a great question.
Where are you with relaying the free-to-air satellites, such as the C-band and the Ku-band, which I think would fit the same argument as your over-the-air broadcast?
I have no idea. I've never looked at that. So I haven't paid any attention to that.
There's all sorts of new business opportunities out there, what I'm hearing. Please identify yourself.
Sabrina Darty, Visioneering. If your billing address is New York, but you're watching in Boston, what signal are you watching?
So the way the technology works is you cannot watch out of market. It blocks you up. And as a result, you're not watching anything today. What we will ultimately do is, and I think this may already be in or not, is that since you are an Aereo customer, we will let you have free access while you're near Boston, for Boston, but you cannot set up recordings or things along those lines. Those are all in your home market.
So there's no Hopper Aereo in the works?
There's no Hopper area in the works, no.
Next question.
Simon Applebaum from Tomorrow will be televised on Blog Talk Radio. At the All Things Digital Conference a few weeks ago, Barry Diller, who was a keynote, said, and I'm paraphrasing, that when your service reaches a certain subscriber level, you will do original content. Was he misspeaking, or is there down the road for Aereo a role to play in either producing original content or being a distribution avenue for new networks?
My understanding is that there was, the context of that was what could happen in the future, not what will happen and what Aereo's plan is. And I think it's fair to say that once you get to a certain scale, one of the options, what could happen is there could be new programming, there could be any number of those things. That's not Aereo, what we're working on or doing. I think that is certainly one of the options to consider when you get to that scale. I still personally, I'm not convinced that those models, the integrated models, make a lot of sense, because I think tech guys really good should focus on tech and allow that platform to be used by anybody who's coming in, irrespective of what the competitive dynamics happen to be. But that's Barry's certainly right. That is one of the things that could happen.
Well, our time is up. I want to say, Chet, thank you for taking the time. I want to recognize the audience is full of incredibly the elite of journalism in the consumer electronics technology space. So thank you. What a great audience. And I want to go back to you and say, looking back at my career and thinking of the disruptive technologies that have come along, most of them have been behind a big corporation, arguably faceless, and it was like corporations, but you put yourself out there. In the face of incredible animosity from leading players in American business, and a vitriolic reaction that is frankly unjustified in my view, given the legality, whether it's legal or not, ultimately a court will decide, but at this point it's pretty high up. A court is held, and you have a great legal argument. And the fact that free over-the-air television is an issue, which is always free over-the-air television that people are supposed to get, you have the ethical argument as well. But the fact that you as an individual are being attacked so deeply,
Am I though? I didn't pick that up. It may be behind closed doors.
Look, I say things, and my in-laws who escaped communist Poland say, how could you say that thing? Aren't you worried about when you turn your car on what will happen? You're way beyond me. I mean, so good luck. I hope you have great insurance. Stay safe. And fight the good fight. Thank you very much, Chet.
Thank you.